Good morning. How's everybody doing? Doing great. So in North Carolina, in terms of farm income, what are the top 5 crops in North Carolina, or products off of the farm? What are the top 5 in North Carolina?
Corn. Sweet potato.
Tobacco.
No.
Marijuana.
Yes.
We don't talk about that. Okay, so what I heard was corn? No. I heard sweet potatoes? No.
Soybeans.
I heard soy? No. Tobacco is number 4.
About pigs or chickens? Cotton. Soybeans.
Broilers are number 1. Hogs are number 2. Turkeys. And the greenhouse industry. So greenhouse things, landscaping and greenhouse. Ornamentals, it's number 5. So as we talk about, especially Eastern North Carolina, as we talk about the fact that it used to be that tobacco by itself was over 40% of North Carolina's farm income, not very long ago, and now barely breaks the top 5. And that confinement livestock, hogs, chickens, and turkeys, are over 60% of North Carolina's farm income. Those 3 together are in the neighborhood of 65% of North Carolina's farm income. Now these numbers all shift, obviously, from year to year, depending on yields and prices and all those kinds of other stuff. But in general, that's been holding true for a while. Let me try one other thing. If we think back through your family. Raise your hand if your great-grandparents farmed. So now just watch the hands. Keep your hands up. Now keep your hands up if your grandparents farmed. Keep your hands up if your parents farmed. Keep your hands up if if you or one of your siblings farms. Now keep your hand up if your kids are going to farm. No, but this is great. Keep your hand up if you're going to farm, even if you did it. I mean, sometimes we do this now, and now there are, when you say, if you're going to farm or your generation's going to farm. Okay, you go put it on. Did y'all watch what just happened with that? So that's the story in general. Those 2 things are the story of agriculture in North Carolina over the last, how far back did we just go? About 100 years? That's kind of, in that ballpark, give or take.
Good morning, my name is Dania Davey, and I am an attorney with the Land Loss Prevention Project, which is a nonprofit law firm that's celebrating its 30th year anniversary that's based in Durham, North Carolina. We provide legal services to all 100 counties throughout the state as long as you income qualify and you have a legal issue that is related to your land or your home or a rural livelihood that you're trying to maintain. So just wanted to put the plug out there that we are celebrating our anniversary, and this October we will be having a symposium and a dinner to commemorate the legacy of land loss, not just in North Carolina, but taking it from North Carolina all the way up to an international perspective. So the organization was started to address the issue of African American farmland loss, which whenever I talk to people about the fact that I work with Black farmers, they kind of like look back at me like, that's a real thing, and I always have to just address the fact that there's just not a lot of information or education out there about what farmers really look like. And actually, African Americans amassed over 19 million acres of farmland, and in 1910 that was the height of African American farmland ownership. So there were a substantial landholding in the country held by African Americans post-emancipation. Today in North Carolina, we've seen from 1997 to 2007, over 300,000 acres of African American land ownership end up being lost. And so part of why this organization came into existence was to figure out how folks that some of which were raised on farms in North Carolina and went on to law school and wanted to address the issues that were relevant to their communities got together and started thinking about legal strategies to address these issues. Now, the reality is that all farmers are experiencing land loss. Development and just the proliferation of urban centers is really changing the attractiveness of living in a rural community. And so we're seeing brain drains and we're seeing generational losses of young folks who otherwise would have stayed on the farm and helped out mom and dad, now moving to urban centers to look for other opportunities. So our services have expanded and are really trying to think about ways to bridge that gap and re-establish interests in not just coming back to the rural communities, but supporting rural communities and rural livelihoods. A couple of years ago, in 2011, I actually made a documentary. One of the folks in the documentary is actually present today, looking at African American farmland issues. And part of the reason that I even wanted to film this was that I came to North Carolina with a project that I had designed to address estate planning and farm transition planning. And I was going out into communities and I was making these presentations. Someone this morning asked me if I had a PowerPoint, and I said no, because you'll go out and you'll have all these great pictures and numbers and have this really great presentation, and folks come up to you afterwards and they're like, that was just so great, thanks so much. And then you're like, have you considered getting a will drafted? Oh, well, no, I gotta get some things together first. And it's really a hard sell to get folks to work with lawyers, especially in rural communities where a lot of people have had really bad experiences with lawyers. And sometimes, just that legacy of the mistrust, whether it's perceived or actual bad experiences, can cause there to be a lack of estate planning. And that, with the aging farmer population that we're seeing, estate planning is a major issue. And I could talk about that for a really long time, but I only have 2 minutes left, so I will just say that one of the things that we really need our communities to be doing is having the dialogue about what we see for the next generation of farming. We're going to see a lot of transitions, not just in the diversity of what's grown, but the diversity of who's coming back to farm, who's actually the next generation of farmers. And we want the current farmers to really, be thinking strategically, not just about what's wanting to leave your land just to all your kids because that's the kind or benevolent thing to do, but really think strategically about who is going to maintain that land as a farm if that's something that's of value to you. Don't just expect that your eldest son is going to carry on the business. I tell the story that I have of my best friend from law school. His grandfather was a farmer, and when we were in law school and I was talking about how I wanted to do estate planning for farmers, he was like, you can save your time. The minute that my name goes on that deed, it's sold. And I was like, no, please. I'll do anything to convince you. And I can say that today he has quit his law firm job and has moved back to the farm and is working to grow his family's agribusiness. And I really think that these conversations have to take place cross-generationally with the tax specialist, with attorneys, folks that you can trust, and really make sure that happens and you don't just assume what's going to happen to your land in the next generation. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Benny Bunting. I actually live fairly close to here. Live in Martin County. So I have farmed in Martin County. Right now I'm working full-time with the Rural Advancement Foundation, and I assist farmers and meet with farmers every day. I have seen what's happened personally and through working with other farmers on the concentration of agriculture in North Carolina. There's always in agriculture has been some unintended results of happenings that come about. One of the things in, let's look at hogs. If we talk about what happened in hogs, grains, we were just about the same point we are right now as far as income in our grains. Grains were high. We had a lot of independent hog farmers. when the grain prices went high, those farmers were going out of business. Chapter 12 bankruptcy was in existence. What worked best in Chapter 12 bankruptcies was for steady income, which was contract ag. If you go back and track it, if you look at what the Chapter 12 bankruptcy filings and contract hog agriculture, it follows the same pattern. And so that concentration was very quick, but it was an unintended consequence of high grain prices during that time. Is what influenced that concentration. We've got poultry. If we look at poultry, we're in an area right here that is has a new enterprise of poultry in this area. But I want you to understand what the farmers go through in this, because when I saw the advertisement that came on for new poultry enterprise here, there was $221 million investment that this company was coming in and bringing it into Lenoir County. But if you go back and look at what the numbers tell you, that 121 million of it was what the company was bringing in, and 100 million was on the farmers, where they were putting this investment in. So, you know, that is where we really need to look at how poultry has been the poster child for concentration. In the early 70s, because I got wrapped up in it, in the early 70s, they were saying that full-time pay for part-time work. Boy, that sounded good. And I got hung into it. And I found out that when you get into that, it's confinement operation, but all confinement operations are confinement for the livestock and the personnel that are involved. You are at the mercy of someone else's business strategy then, not yours. So we have to be prepared. We are working right now with poultry has had its ups and downs. So contract farmers have had the same thing. And a little further west from here, you know, we've got several companies. Pilgrim Pride shut down a number of facilities. Townsend shut down. So we've got a large number of growers that are losing everything they have based on contract agriculture. We're going to see an unintended consequence of tobacco. Insurance now, tobacco, you cannot, to get insurance on tobacco, you cannot raise that tobacco consecutively on the same land. Tobacco farmers are going to be looking for good land, so we're looking to see that some of the change will be more competition for land. Because if you look at what we've got in total acres of tobacco, and you have to increase that for your rotation, you're going to see an awful lot of competition. And we're looking at some unintended consequences that come in as far as prices. Would like to talk some more on some strategies on some of these issues, but I think my time is up.
My name is Melissa Bailey, and since 2001, I have worked with the farm worker population, first in Johnston County and then later in Wayne, Greene, and Lenoir. What I want to do is just try to give you a brief overview of some of the transitions I've seen. In 2001, when I first began working, if you think back to that time, farm workers were eligible for driver licenses. Well, for farm worker populations, that made a huge amount of difference in their livelihoods because they were able to get on the migrant stream, the stream being a path that begins in Florida and goes up, you can go up to New York, you can go up to Pennsylvania, to Michigan. There are several different streams. But they were able to independently travel. They would pool their money together, they had their jobs, and they would migrate. And that has happened in agriculture for a very, very, very long time. So what started happening, what I considered one of the pivotal things was that when North Carolina no longer allowed driver license for immigrants, because most of us know that the workforce that was employed in agriculture and still is today lacks documentation. These were people who came over and who began working in agriculture. Most of our rural communities host many, many families that have settled out or who continue to work in agriculture in some form. And one of the most difficult things for us has been to have that dialogue and that conversation. It's the elephant in the room. No one, everyone has very strong opinions, but we stay away from that. At NC Field and both, in all the work that I've done, we have we just look at people. So I'd encourage everyone during this conversation, we're talking about people. So this particular group of people began to suffer a lot after that. So what happened to the stream was they could no longer move. They were no longer mobile. So we started seeing breakdowns in the stream. So Georgia needed workers in Vidalia, but it was dangerous now to go to Vidalia. It was dangerous to go to South Carolina. It was dangerous to come to North Carolina. It was dangerous to go to New York and Pennsylvania and Michigan. So there were breakdowns. People were afraid to move, and with good reason. So from there, what had happened was the old system, what they did, I guess, before, it kind of threw farm workers back, way back to where they used contractors and drivers and had to load people up and take them from workplace to workplace. So there was actually a growth in, or more development of what we call FLCs, which were federal labor contractors. Unfortunately, I think as an unintended consequence, we ended up with a lot of unregistered FLCs. Well, they are not federal labor contractors. They were unregistered contractors. And they were literally, because the farm workers themselves didn't know which questions to ask. The farmer needed the labor. It ended up causing issues a lot of times. On more than one occasion, beginning about 2008, 2009, we picked up many, many cases of slavery from Sampson County, Duplin. We found them in Greene. We found them all over the place. So when I say slavery, I'm saying we're talking people who were working for nothing. The contractor refused to pay them, period. We couldn't get the money. The contractor would disappear. It was ridiculous. And there was no way to control it. This happened a lot. This continues to happen today. So I guess with the farmers, and what we've seen also as part of that transition is farmers have had, I think what I've noticed is it's not small farmers. What's happening is small farmers are joining together and they're creating these corporate farms, and then they're hiring a farm manager who's hiring a labor contractor who's hiring workers. And so what you end up with is this huge disconnect. The problem with that is farmers are ultimately responsible for that. So in other words, if you've got a bad contractor out there, and we've got kids in fields, and these kids are left without water, and it's 110 degrees, and it's your land or your crop, that's a really bad thing. And it's very dangerous. It's dangerous to the grower, it's dangerous to the contractor, it's dangerous to the child. Now, when I talk about child labor, that's kind of we all know that one. Let's talk about that. In tobacco, for example, children in Eastern North Carolina and many other states to this day, you have to be 12 to work in agriculture, to work in tobacco. That happens every summer. We've pulled 9-year-olds out. We have lots of kids who are employed. The problem with that, the only issue I see with that is that we know a lot more about pesticides now than we did. We know a lot more about nicotine. We know a lot more about the consumption of that in our bodies. We know that these pesticides and the chemicals that are being sprayed were tested on 100 to 150 pound males. And I can tell you that a lot of my kids don't go that weight. We also know it's getting hotter. You can't dispute the heat and the fact that it's getting much hotter out there for longer periods of time. All that said, that is the only population in the United States that can legally touch tobacco. Okay? Everyone else has to be over 18, right? You buy tobacco products, you have to be 18. So there are a lot of things, types of indignity or injustices that we see, but it's not, I think our big challenge in the community is not coming off as anti-grower, anti-farmer, because we're really not. You know, a lot of kids from our community love what they do. They enjoy the fact they come from a farm working community. They're proud of that. And a lot of them are extremely interested in having their own operations and in doing their own things. So I think that's part of it. And also, you know, having that dialogue and talking about the whole farm. You know, we were really happy to be invited to the Agri-Medicine Institute. They concentrate on farmer health a lot. And I'm learning so much about farmer health. And then they are really interested in looking at the farmer as a whole system. And we're really interested in everybody looking at the farm as a whole system, because it does take all of us. And that's it.
Okay, my name is Kenny Haynes. I'm an organic farmer from Queens County, North Carolina. I've been organic for, I'm starting my 26th year. And we started, like I said, about 26 years ago with 10 acres. And we farm about 350 acres now. And there's two of us, my son and I. When we started with produce, but as Benny said a while ago, everything got consolidated, and we were selling to a lot of markets like Well Springs markets and Freshfields markets and Boston market, and then they all were brought out to Whole Foods, and then instead of having competition between each other, they had one buyer for all of them, and instead of you deciding on a fair price, it was, well, we can pay you this, you know. And so now we farm primarily, well, it's all grain now, and we also market grain for other organic farmers in the state. We move grain to New York, Virginia, Indiana, Kentucky, North Carolina. We sell wheat for flour to flour mills here within the state. We sell to some mills, one mill in particular that's been in the same family since 1755, and they grind organic wheat. We grow some heirloom varieties of wheat and corn that we sell to specialized mills like Anson Mills in Columbia, South Carolina, and then we sell to a small mill in Asheville, North Carolina that just got up and running about 2 years ago. Carolina Ground, we've been working with them since they got off the ground, and that's about it, I guess.
I just want to pull out a couple of themes from what I've heard from our different speakers, and then we'll open it up for questions for a few minutes. We've got we got a good bit of, I think we go till 11:15, is that right? So we got about a half an hour to get this discussion going, but let me pull out a couple of themes that I heard sort of across the table. One of which is concentration. A lot of, fewer and fewer owning more and more. And all of the different downstream challenges that presents. In the livestock industry, as there have been fewer and fewer companies to contract with, that has given growers fewer and fewer options for, and frankly, worse and worse contracts. We've heard a lot about this issue of transitions, of both the transitions in terms of black farm loss, but also then generational farm. And this is another major issue in North Carolina, which is that with an average age of farmers that is, 57 now, 58? I don't remember the last number.
It used to be my age, and I just turned 60.
How long ago was it your age? No, I'm just, yeah, so it was 59 or 60. With that as an average age, what that means is that a very significant amount of that land is going to transition between generations, and that generational transfer is where a lot of farmland is lost. Also, these issues of, in terms of farm workers dealing with more and more concentrated and this disconnection. Okay, some of these disconnections where things are more siloed, where you have this disconnection between the growers and the people who are working for them. There are now three or four different layers between them, the grower and the actual farmer and the people who are working on the land. The disconnection between generations, the disconnection across these in different areas of agriculture. So much of what we're here to talk about today is reintegration. Is how do we bring people back together? How do we reconnect folks around community and food and their faith and all of those types of things? And so I just wanted to sort of pull out, and then also with Kenny, that this growth of a set of people who are finding a business that and making a real living in a different way and finding a different way of being, but also the same challenges that the same challenges that we see in poultry of the concentration where there are fewer and fewer growers. In Kenny's story about it used to be that I had 5 or 6 folks, so they'd compete for what I was trying to sell. Now there's one buyer and he tells me what the price is. We see that all the way across agriculture, and that drives the price down, that drives the grower is less and less, has less and less power in that relationship. And that means that there is more and more pressure to reduce costs. I would throw in that increasingly what we see is that farmers farm for the ability to stay on there, to live in a rural community. That they farm not to make a living, but just in order to farm. A lot of folks talk about having off-farm jobs to subsidize their farming habit, but that increasingly, in my mind, having a person who cares about the place that they live and farm and grew up is increasingly an economic disadvantage that the industry takes great advantage of. And I think that's a problem.